The vast chamber of the Galactic Federation was a terrifying sight, a collection of nightmares given form. Giant insectoids clicked sharp mandibles. Massive reptilian beasts with scales like armor plates loomed in their seats, and floating jellyfish creatures with glowing tentacles pulsed with energy. They were the rulers of the galaxy, ancient and powerful. In the center of it all stood a single, seemingly fragile figure, Captain Eva Rostova, the human ambassador. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the judging aliens. The holographic display before the council showed Earth, a beautiful blue gem. The High Chancellor, a colossal reptile named Gorlak, shifted his weight to sound like grinding stones. "Your world is pleasant," he rumbled, his voice dripping with condescension. "But your species is soft. You have no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. You are weak. Why should the Federation fear you? Why should we grant you membership?" A low murmur of agreement echoed through the chamber. Eva took a steadying breath. "Respected Chancellor, our strength is not in our individual bodies, but in our—" Gorlak interrupted with a wave of a clawed hand. "Do not speak of your ingenuity. We have technology that can shatter stars. Entertain us. Show us. What is the most fearsome predator from your little world?" This was a test Eva had dreaded. She input a command. A hologram of a great white shark, powerful and sleek, snapped at the air. The council stared for a moment before a collective, mocking laughter filled the room. A hologram of a creature that hunted in pools of molten lava replaced her shark, effortlessly dwarfing it. "You waste our time," hissed her insectoid delegate. Eva tried again. The image of a Siberian tiger, muscles coiled and fangs bared, appeared. The laughter grew louder, more insulting. Another hologram, this time of a six-armed beast that could tear a starship hull apart with its bare hands, made her tiger look like a kitten. "These are simple beasts," Gorlak boomed, slamming his fist, making the very floor vibrate. "Amusing for a primitive safari. Nothing more. Your final chance, human. Do not insult us again. Show us your absolute toughest predator, the one that truly rules your world." The entire council fell silent, hundreds of alien eyes fixed on her, waiting for her failure. Eva's shoulders slumped. She looked down, a wave of grim resignation washing over her. They would not be satisfied. They would not listen. They had to see for themselves. She looked up, her face a mask of solemn warning. "Very well," she said, her voice quiet but cutting through the silence. "But you must contain it perfectly. You must follow every protocol without question, and you must never, ever let it sense your fear." She tapped her datapad. A single file transferred to the council's central computer. "The data is yours. Its name is the Ruin." A curious silence fell. What kind of name was that for a predator? The file transferred from the human ambassador's datapad was received by the Federation's central computer with a simple ping, a sound utterly insignificant for the terror it contained. The council, still buzzing with a mixture of amusement and impatience, expected to see schematics for an impossibly strong cage, designs for powerful energy-dampening fields, or the biological readout of some monstrous creature. Instead, what flashed upon the main viewer was a complex, swirling model of a molecule, a string of data and genetic code. Confusion replaced mockery in the chamber. The insectoid scientists chittered amongst themselves, their rapid-fire language indicating disbelief. Gorlak, the High Chancellor, leaned forward, his massive reptilian eyes narrowing. "This is no creature," he boomed, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "This is a microorganism, a pathogen? You call this your greatest predator? This is a joke." Another wave of laughter started, but it was weaker this time, tinged with uncertainty. Captain Eva Rostova stood firm, her face grim. "It is not a predator in the way you understand," she explained, her voice calm but carrying a heavy weight. "It is not an animal. It is more like a key, a wrong key. We call it prion. It is not alive. It does not breathe. It does not eat. It does not think. It cannot be killed because it was never alive to begin with. It only does one thing. It takes the essential proteins of a living, thinking being, and it folds them. It bends them into a new shape, a copy of itself. It turns the host's own body against itself, until the mind is gone and the body is nothing but a ruined, empty shell. The Federation's head scientist, a proud insectoid named Dr. Crix, stepped forward, his exoskeleton gleaming under the lights. "This is primitive nonsense," he declared, his voice a sharp click. "Our biofilters are perfect. Our medical science can cure any disease known to the galaxy. This simple parasite is no threat to a civilization as advanced as ours. It is a curiosity, nothing more." He turned to the Chancellor. "With your permission, we will synthesize a microscopic sample for study. We will prove the humans' fears are as backward as their technology." Eva's eyes went wide with alarm. "No, you must not. You don't understand. You cannot contain it in a lab. It is not a virus. It doesn't have DNA to splice or RNA to interrupt. There is no cure. Please, you must listen to me." Her pleas were met with dismissive waves. Gorlak, curious now and eager to prove human weakness, gave the order. "Do it. Synthesize a sample. Let us see this ruin for ourselves." Dr. Crix gave a proud bow and marched off to the pristine, automated maximum security laboratory, a place that had contained plasma-based life forms and cosmic plagues. He was certain of his victory. Inside the lab, a robotic arm, controlled by Crix from a safe observation room, assembled the protein sequence. In a sealed vial, held in place by energy fields stronger than steel, a tiny, almost invisible speck of white material appeared. It looked like dust. It was utterly harmless. Crix laughed. "This is it. This is what they fear." On the main viewer, a molecular scan showed trillions of misfolded proteins, inert and silent. The containment field is at 100%. It is perfectly safe. Lower the field for 1 nanosecond. I want a pure molecular scan without field interference. A warning light flashed on his console. Protocol violation. He overrode it. For a billionth of a second, the energy field flickered. The scanners whirred, collecting their data. The readout was perfect. Dr. Crix was satisfied. He did not see it. He did not notice the tiny, undetectable puff of air that escaped from a microscopic vent in the vial's casing during that nanosecond flicker, a vent designed to equalize pressure. The air, carrying trillions of the misfolded prion, was sucked into the laboratory's climate control system. The invisible cloud was pumped silently throughout the entire ventilation network of the sector. The ruin was free. Dr. Crix left the laboratory feeling immensely pleased with himself. He had proven the human wrong. The so-called ruin was nothing but simple organic dust, easily contained and utterly harmless. He felt a slight headache coming on, but he paid it no mind, blaming the stress of the council meeting and the humans' dramatic warnings. The next day, however, things felt different. In his morning lab meeting, he reached for his datapad and fumbled, his delicate insectoid grip failing him for a moment. The pad clattered to the floor. His colleagues chittered with amusement. "Careful, Crix. You are folding under the pressure," one joked, using the human strange word. The irony was completely lost on him. Later, his speech seemed slightly off, a subtle slur in his precise, clicking language that others noticed but dismissed as fatigue. He decided to get an early meal, hoping food would help. In the crowded cafeteria, he coughed, a dry, hacking sound. He didn't know that with that cough, trillions of the misfolded proteins were launched into the recycled air, floating like invisible ghosts. A cleaning unit later wiped the table where he sat, its damp cloth collecting the microscopic particles before it rolled away to clean another surface, smearing the unseen danger onto a handrail in a corridor. Back in his quarters, Crix's condition began to deteriorate rapidly. His thoughts, usually sharp and clear, became foggy and confused. He tried to review his findings, but the words on the screen swam before his compound eyes. He stood up and stumbled, his legs uncoordinated. A deep, unsettling vacancy was growing behind his eyes. The next morning, he did not report for work. Concerned, 2 of his assistants entered his room. They found him sitting on the floor, staring at the wall. His body twitched in small, jerky motions. When they spoke to him, he did not respond. His head lolled to the side, and a string of drool dripped from his mandible. They called for medical help immediately. In the med bay, the finest doctors in the Federation were baffled. Their scanners swept over Crix's body again and again. They found no foreign bacteria, no viral infection, no radiation poisoning, no genetic damage. It was as if nothing was wrong. Yet, their patient was clearly being destroyed from within. His brain activity was shutting down, fading like a dying star. His body's own proteins were ceasing to function, folding into useless, wrong shapes that then caused other proteins to misfold, a terrible, silent chain reaction. It was a medical impossibility. They placed him in a high-level isolation unit, treating him as a biohazard out of caution, though their instruments detected no threat. A young medtech, a diligent avian-like creature named Elra, was tasked with monitoring his vitals from outside the clear wall. She spoke softly into her recorder. Vitals are stable, but no change in neural activity. She watched the readings, worried and confused. Inside the unit, Crix was utterly still. Then his head slowly lifted. His compound eyes, once bright with intelligence, were now dull and empty like dusty glass. He looked directly at Elra. His mandibles moved, and a sound came out. It wasn't his own voice. It was a perfect, horrifying mimicry of Elra's own voice from moments before, parroting her words with dead accuracy. Vitals are stable. No change. Elra froze, her feathers ruffling in instinctual terror. This was not a conscious act. It was a grotesque echo, a final, broken reflex of a brain that was being systematically unmade. The thing that was once Dr. Crix then began to shudder violently, its whole body seizing on the bed, a marionette with its strings cut. At that exact moment, in a different part of the station, the cleaner bot that had wiped Crix's table was now polishing a handrail near a major transit hub. A high-ranking official, rushing to a meeting, grabbed that same rail to steady himself as a tram went by. He then proceeded to his office, scratching his nose absent-mindedly. In the cafeteria, 3 more beings who had been near Crix started complaining of headaches. The chain was continuing. The ruin was not just in one room. It was on the move, riding on air currents and on touch, an unstoppable shadow spreading through the bright, advanced station, and nobody knew it was already there. The silent, invisible spread of the ruin was faster than anyone could have feared. The medtech Elra's terrified report was initially dismissed as stress, a misunderstanding of a patient's seizure. But then another report came in. Then another. A logistics officer was found in a corridor, staring at a wall, twitching. A chef in the cafeteria began slurring his speech before collapsing. The station's advanced medical AI, programmed to find patterns, finally connected the dots. All the new cases had been in the same sector as Dr. Crix. All exhibited the same terrifying, unexplainable symptoms. A cold dread began to replace confusion. The High Chancellor Gorlak, watching the reports flood his command screen, felt a primal fear he had not known in centuries. He remembered the human's warning, her grim face, her plea for perfect containment. He had ignored it. With a shaking claw, he slammed the emergency quarantine protocol for the entire sector. Giant blast doors sealed with a final, thunderous boom, trapping thousands of healthy beings inside with the sick and the dying. But it was a futile gesture, an action taken far too late. The prion were not just in the people. They were in the air vents, on the surfaces, on the clothes of those who had already walked out of the sector before the doors closed. Panic, once a slow burn, now exploded into an inferno. Citizens, terrified of the unseen sickness that turned people into vacant, echoing shells, rushed the sealed doors, pounding on them. Security forces tried to hold them back, but in the struggle, helmets were knocked off, armor was grabbed, and the invisible particles passed from frantic hands to uniformed gloves. The disease rode the wave of fear, spreading faster. The comms channels were flooded with screams, cries for help, and the awful, empty mimicry of the infected who repeated the last sounds they heard. The station was descending into madness. Gorlak watched from his secure chamber, a fortress within the chaos. His screens showed the collapse of his society. He saw a strong warrior, a species known for its bravery, break down crying before slumping into a vacant stare. He saw a mother desperately trying to shield her young from the crowd, only to stumble and fall, never getting up again. The human's words echoed in his mind. You must never let it sense your fear. The entire station was screaming in terror. It was a feast for the ruin. He could not fight this. He could not shoot it. He could not reason with it. He was the leader of the most powerful civilization in the galaxy, and he was utterly helpless. In a moment of pure desperation, he opened a channel to the human ambassador's quarters. Eva Rostova appeared on the screen, sitting calmly in her room, the sounds of alarms faint behind her. She looked at him not with anger, but with a deep, weary pity. Human, Gorlak roared, his voice cracking with strain. What have you brought upon us? What is this thing? How we stop it? Eva's response was quiet, resigned, and utterly final. You can't stop it. There is no cure. You can't negotiate with it. You can't outsmart it. There's only one way. You must burn it. You must sterilize the entire station. Every deck, every corridor, every air duct. There is no other way. Gorlak recoiled from a screen as if struck. That's billions of lives. My people, this station is a wonder of the galaxy. You asked me to destroy it all? I'm not asking, Eva said softly. I'm telling you what must be done. It is the only protocol. We learned it through loss you cannot imagine. The Chancellor was about to respond, to rage against this impossible solution, when a soft, familiar hiss filled his secure chamber. It was the sound of the main door unlocking. That was impossible. The door could only be opened from inside, or by the override code, known only to his personal guard stationed outside. His blood ran cold. The door slid open smoothly. Standing in the doorway was not an enemy soldier or a panicked citizen. It was his personal guard. The being's head was tilted at a wrong angle. Its eyes, usually sharp and alert, were wide and utterly empty. It took a single, shuffling step into the room. Its mouth moved, and it spoke in a perfect, hollow copy of the Chancellor's own voice from just seconds before, repeating his last desperate words back to him. Billions of lives. My people. The guard stood there, a silent, shuffling horror made from a friend, blocking the only way out. The ruin was no longer out there. It was in the room with him. The sight of his own guard, a being he trusted completely, now reduced to a vacant, echoing shell using his own despairing words, shattered the last of Gorlak's defiance. A primal survival instinct, buried deep beneath centuries of civilized rule, erupted within him. This was not a fight. This was an escape from a plague. With a roar that was equal parts terror and fury, the massive Chancellor lunged, not at the infected guard, but to the side, grabbing a heavy metal console and hurling it with all his strength at the creature. It was a distraction, a violent burst of noise and movement. The thing that was once his guard turned its head toward the crash, its empty gaze following the sound. In that split second, Gorlak charged past it, his bulk squeezing through the doorway, and slammed his fist on the emergency close button. The door sealed shut, trapping the horror inside his chamber. He didn't stop running. Alarms blared all around him, but they were just noise now. The real danger was silent and in the air he breathed. He had to get off the station. He found a few other council members and high-ranking officers in a nearby shuttle bay, their faces etched with the same panic he felt. They were trying to organize a desperate evacuation, but chaos ruled. People shoved and screamed, trying to force their way onto any ship that looked functional. Gorlak saw an officer suddenly stop shoving and just stand still, his eyes losing focus. The ruin was here, in the bay. There was no time. Forget the evacuation. Seal this bay now. Anyone showing symptoms stays behind, he bellowed, his voice of command cutting through the panic. His remaining loyal guards, though terrified, followed the order, using force to push the swelling, infected crowd back before sealing the inner bay doors. It was a brutal, horrible choice, leaving hundreds to their fate, but it was the only one left. Inside a military shuttle, Safe for a moment, Gorlak opened a channel to the human ambassador. Eva Rostova answered, her face calm on the screen, the image of her quiet room a stark contrast to the hell outside. There must be another way. Gorlak pleaded, his voice raw. Your people live with this. How? What is the trick? Eva's expression was one of infinite sadness. There is no trick. We don't live with it. We fear it. We contain it with absolute paranoia. We burn everything. We lost entire cities learning this lesson. Your technology made you arrogant. You believed your scanners and your filters could control anything in the universe. This thing cannot be controlled. It can only be destroyed. Completely. Totally. You must erase every trace of it, or it will never end. It will jump to another ship, another world. It will consume the galaxy. Gorlak looked at the station schematic on his own screen. The infection alerts were blooming like poisonous flowers in every sector. Millions were already gone. Billions would follow. The disease was spreading to the docking ships. He could see the alerts of outbreaks on vessels trying to flee. This horror was moments away from escaping into the wider Federation. He saw it then with terrible clarity. The human was not a bringer of destruction. She was a warning that they had refused to hear. She had tried to protect them from their own pride. His shoulders slumped. The weight of 1 billion worlds fell upon him. He was the Chancellor. His duty was to protect the Federation. There was only one way to do that now. He turned to his chief officer, a grim-faced reptilian warrior. Activate the station's self-destruct sequence. Initiate a full core purge. Scorch protocol. The officer stared at him, his scales paling. Sir? The entire station? But the human ambassador, she is still on board. Her life signs are still there. Gorlak looked one last time at Eva's face on the screen. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. She knew. She had known this would be the only end from the very beginning. She knew the price of our arrogance, Gorlak said, his voice a hollow whisper. And now, so do we. The officer, his hand trembling, input the final codes. A deep, thrumming vibration began to course through the station's very frame. The final countdown had begun. The deep, thrumming vibration that signaled the start of the station's self-destruct sequence was a feeling more than a sound, a terrible hum that resonated in the bones of every being still alive enough to feel it. In her quiet quarters, Captain Eva Rostova felt the familiar tremor through the floor, and she closed her eyes, not in fear, but in acceptance. She had known this was the only possible outcome the moment the arrogant council had demanded the file. She had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that they would be smarter, that they would see the warning in her eyes and choose another path. But they had to see for themselves. Now, the bill for that curiosity had come due, and the cost was unimaginable. Around her, the station was a symphony of terror, but she sat in a pocket of calm. She opened a channel on her datapad, a direct and encrypted line to Earth Central Command. Her face was serene, her voice steady, a rock in the middle of a storm. This is Ambassador Rostova. The package has been opened. The containment protocol has been initiated by the host. The site will be sterilized. Mission accomplished. She ended the transmission. There was nothing else to say. Her people would understand. They had done this before. They had burned their own cities to the ground to stop the ruin. She was just one soldier completing a terrible, necessary duty. She thought of green fields and blue skies on Earth, a world she had helped protect from the galaxy's arrogance. And she smiled softly as the vibration grew stronger. Outside, the Chancellor's shuttle, dubbed the Last Breath, shot away from the dying station like a bullet. Inside, the mood was funeral. No one spoke. They could only watch the main view screen as the magnificent starbase Genesis, the crown jewel of the Federation, a city among the stars that had housed billions, grew smaller behind them. Gorlak sat in his command chair, a broken leader. He had not just lost a station, he had murdered it. He had given the order to kill billions of his own people to save trillions more. The weight of it was crushing his soul. He had believed his civilization was the pinnacle of power and wisdom in the universe. In a single day, A single human woman and a speck of dust had shown him that they were just children playing with forces they could not comprehend. The human strength was not in weapons or technology. It was in this terrible, unwavering resolve to do the horrific thing that needed to be done. The station's core reached critical mass. For a breathtaking moment, the entire structure glowed from within, every viewport, every seam shining with a blinding white light. Then, the light consumed itself. A silent, sun-bright fireball erupted, vaporizing metal, glass, technology, and flesh in an instant. There was no sound in the vacuum of space, just a beautiful, expanding flower of pure energy that erased every trace of the horror within. It was both the most awful and most necessary thing Gorlak had ever witnessed. The shockwave hit the shuttle, rocking it gently, a final farewell from the dead. The last breath floated in the sudden, immense quiet. The stars looked down, cold and indifferent. The survivors on the shuttle were alone with their grief and their guilt. The silence was shattered by an urgent beep from the comm station. An officer looked at his screen, his face draining of color. "Chancellor, we are being hailed. It's the 5th Battle Fleet. They were on patrol nearby. They must have heard the final distress calls before." The main view screen flickered to life. The furious, grief-stricken face of Fleet Commander Forlag filled the screen. His eyes burned with hatred as he looked at Gorlak. "Gorlak, you monster. You destroyed Genesis. You killed billions. Our families. Our people. And our sensors show you let the human live long enough to destroy herself. You conspired with that primitive species to annihilate us." Before Gorlak could even form a word of explanation, Forlag screamed his order. "And now you flee in a shuttle like a coward? No, the Federation will have justice. All weapons target that shuttle. Destroy them." On the view screen, the powerful warships of the 5th Fleet turned their menacing gun ports toward the tiny, defenseless shuttle last breath. Targeting lasers painted their hull, and the distinct hum of energy weapons charging up vibrated through the shuttle structure. They had survived the apocalypse only to be executed by their own people. There was nowhere to run. The warships filled the entire view screen, and the air grew thick with the promise of final oblivion. The warships of the 5th Battle Fleet filled the view screen of the shuttle last breath, their weapon ports glowing with a deadly energy, a sight more terrifying than any alien monster. Inside the shuttle, Chancellor Gorlak and his crew could only stare, frozen, at their impending execution. They had survived the horror of the station only to be killed by their own people, a final, cruel twist of fate. Gorlak found his voice a raw, broken thing. He opened a channel, broadcasting to the entire fleet. "Hold your fire. Forlag, you must listen. The human was not our enemy. We were the enemy of our own arrogance. She tried to warn us. We did not listen. The enemy was not a thing you can fight. It was in the air. It was a sickness of the mind and body, a thing that cannot be killed. We had to destroy the station to save you, to save everyone." His plea was met with a scornful hiss from Fleet Commander Forlag. "Lies. You expect us to believe a ghost in the air destroyed the greatest station ever built? You are a traitor, Gorlak, and you will die like one." The weapons glowed brighter, seconds from firing. And then, a new sound cut through the comm channel. A calm, clear female voice. It was Eva Rostova's voice. Her final message, programmed to broadcast automatically to all nearby ships once the station's destruction was confirmed, began to play. Her holographic image appeared on every bridge of every ship in the fleet, a ghost from the fire. "To the ships of the Galactic Federation. This is Captain Eva Rostova of Earth. By the time you hear this, Starbase Genesis is gone, and I'm gone with it. This was not an act of war. It was an act of containment. You asked to see the toughest predator from our world. We showed it to you. You believed you could control it. You were wrong. The thing you called the Ruin is a prion. It is not alive. It cannot be killed. It can only be destroyed by utter annihilation. There is no cure. There is no negotiation. There is only fire. My people learned this lesson through suffering you cannot imagine. We have burned our own cities to stop it. We have sacrificed millions to save billions. We carry this terrible knowledge so that others do not have to. You have now learned the cost of your curiosity. You have learned the price of mocking that which you do not understand. So hear this, and remember it well. Humanity will now be left alone. We will not apply to join your federation. We will offer no more samples. We will remain on our world, guardians of a horror so profound that we must ourselves be humble and cautious. You asked to see our toughest predator. You have seen it. Remember the price. Remember the cost. And never ask us again. The message ended. The silence it left behind was absolute. On the bridge of his flagship, Commander Forlag stood completely still, his rage replaced by a dawning, horrifying comprehension. He looked from a view screen showing the tiny, vulnerable shuttle to the empty space where the station had been. He finally understood the scale of the loss and the reason for it. The human had not been a victim. She had been a soldier who had completed her mission to the very end. She had sacrificed herself to contain a nightmare they had foolishly unleashed. His hand, which had been raised to give the fire order, slowly lowered. The human's true strength was not in claws or ships, but in this terrifying, unwavering responsibility. Any species that could survive a planetary predator that can't be killed, and who possessed the will to do what was necessary to stop it, was not a species to be provoked. They were to be left alone, respected, and feared. Stand down, Forlag whispered, the order echoing through the fleet. The targeting lasers flickered and died. The glow from the weapons faded. The last breath was safe. Chancellor Gorlak looked out at the stars, the image of Eva Rostova's calm face etched into his mind forever. The universe had mocked humanity's predators. It had asked for their toughest one, and it had received a lesson it would never forget. Humanity's place in the galaxy was now secure, not through conquest, but through the awful, terrifying weight of the burden they carried alone. They were the guardians of the silence, the keepers of the fire, and the galaxy would now know to leave them in peace. The narrator's voice returned one final time. And so the universe learned. Humanity's true strength was not in creating weapons, but in the terrible, awful responsibility of containing the ones that nature itself had already created. And they learned to fear the quiet ones, the ones who knew when to burn.